Thank you for the invitation to be a part of the panel, and good morning to everyone. Brad, as always, lays out a very thoughtful, strategic, I think, view of a very difficult situation, and it hasn't gotten better. I'm going to probably take more of a tactical, if you will, look. I'm going to talk a bit about NASA and NASA demand, and then I may try to make a feeble attempt here at the end to try to talk about perhaps some big thoughts, some big questions. I've been an observer and a student of the Space Launch Industrial Base now for a while. I'm going to talk as a customer, and I'm going to talk really at the launch service supplier level as opposed to a component level. So let me go ahead and disappoint you up front. What I have today really are some observations that are probably not very profound, some questions that have probably already been asked, and I don't have any of the answers. But I think we can have a good conversation. So let's see. This is the chart that shows, if you will, what we have on our current NASA contract in terms of launch service providers and the launch vehicles available to us. We are currently in the middle of our annual on-ramp activity that can allow new providers to join our contract or current providers to add new or additional models of their launch vehicles to it. This on-ramp activity will close sometime later this summer or early in the fall. Our current situation is that in the intermediate class, for our larger missions, there's really currently one NASA-certified launch vehicle, it's ULA's Atlas V. However, we expect there to be two viable vehicles for a portion of our intermediate class manifest after the Falcon 9 version 1.1 successfully flies later this summer. The anticipated performance of the Falcon 9 version 1.1 will cover a good portion of our mission portfolio. However, the entire NASA mission portfolio won't be covered until the Falcon Heavy flies. Brett, I believe DoD is probably in a very similar situation. From our view, we see the competitive situation that is developing in the intermediate class as a good thing for incentivizing performance and cost control for our missions. For the medium class, NASA has already conducted the launch service competitions for its manifested missions with launches planned between 14 and 17, having awarded those 5 missions, with 4 going to Delta II and 1 going to Falcon 9. For medium class missions launching in FY18 and beyond, we expect the Falcon 9 and the Antares vehicle to replace what has been the NASA medium class workhorse, the Delta II. The commercial resupply services flights to the International Space Station, which will account for at least 10 Falcon 9 flights and 7 Antares flights between 14 and 17, will, along with other flights, provide the opportunity to further demonstrate the design and the process reliability of these new commercial launch vehicles and their providers. Given our medium-class flight rate of 1 to 2 robotic missions per year, the CRS flights are critical to maintaining a viable medium-class commercial launch service for NASA and the nation. The NASA medium-class missions awarded for launches through 17 benefited from competition between the Delta II and Falcon 9. We expect to gain similar benefit from competition between Falcon 9 and Antares for the missions launching in FY18 and beyond. The small class is a bit more vexing of a situation. NASA desires there to be a dedicated commercial small class launch service because, in our view, it enables an important class of science that's consistent with the decadal survey recommendations. Unlike many small commercial payloads that can rely on ride shares and secondary payload strategies, the primary commercial payloads don't always go to an orbit that is conducive to collecting the science that we need to collect. Lastly, having a commercial small class launch vehicle category allows an entry path for new launch vehicle providers, since most new providers start small and grow their capability. Historically, from 1998 through 2012, NASA flew on average about 1 small class mission per year. However, the actual flight manifest will show that there were some gaps, with some years with multiple flights and other years where there were none at all. Our most recent small class launch was the previously mentioned New Star mission that was launched in June 2012 on an Orbital Science Pegasus XL. Today, 13 June, is the 1-year anniversary of that successful event. So NASA's next small class mission is on track for launch from Vandenberg on the 26th of June, aboard another Pegasus XL, launching the Heliophysics Interface Region Imaging Spectrograph, IRIS, mission for the NASA Science Mission Directorate. Going forward, NASA's commercial launch demand through 17 looks like this. In their immediate class, NASA expects to launch between 1 and 2 missions per year through 2017. I'll obviously leave the DoD and National Security Space demands to Brett, but it appears to us that their demand appears healthy at this time through a similar time frame. For the medium class, NASA again expects to launch 1 to 2 science missions per year through 17. And as previously mentioned, we believe that the CRS flights for cargo resupply of the ISS are critical to maintaining a viable domestic medium-class launch service capability. In the small class, demand appears to be decreasing as compared to the historical record. For instance, the FAA's May 2013 Commercial Space Transportation Forecast projects a worldwide commercial demand from 13 to 2022 of 0.3 dedicated small class launch vehicle dedicated launches per year. In part, due to decreased demand, SpaceX has officially informed NASA that they will no longer be offering the Falcon 1 and 1E vehicles as a part of our NASA Launch Services 2 contract. As for NASA's small class demand, there will be a gap between IRIS and NASA's next small class mission, known as Cygnus, which is currently planning to launch in the late 2016 timeframe. Cygnus, like IRIS, is a Pegasus XL or Athena 1C size mission. The good news is it'll be followed by another similarly sized mission known as Icon a year later in 2017. That selection has just recently been made and announced by NASA. In addition, there will be another small class mission known as TESS, also launching in 17. But TESS will be a bit bigger in the small class. It'll be more akin to a Taurus XL or Athena 2-sized payload. So it's at the upper end of what we define as small class. And in truth, it could probably fly in a medium class launch vehicle depending on the price point achieved for this launch service through the competitive process. It's interesting to me that in what appears to be a number of potential new providers that are developing dedicated launch vehicles for the nano-satellite market. When they're ready, it looks like they'll be able to provide about half of the current lift capability of Pegasus XL or Athena 1. NASA is interested in this capability if it can be provided reliably as a commercial launch service, and for the advertised price points that have been in the open press of somewhere around $10 million or less per launch. The proof, of course, will be in the performance. So given NASA's demand, which for us will primarily be in the medium class sector, driven by our ISS resupply flights and our science missions, and given DoD's demand, which I assume will remain primarily in the intermediate and heavy class, it causes me to frankly wonder about some potentially big questions. I don't think they're new or even profound, but perhaps they're worth asking again. For instance, I wonder if the U.S. government is content to continue to be what I'll call the anchor tenant for the U.S. commercial space transportation industry in the intermediate and medium class beyond 2017. Now, I realize that space exploration technologies may take a bit of issue with my premise, and that's understandable. And to their great credit, they've gone out and sold over half of their 13 to 17 manifests to non-U.S. government users. But when I look at the data, I'm concerned beyond 2017. So my main reference here would be the recent, again, FAA report. The market over the past 10 years has been fairly steady, according to open source, with about somewhere around 65 launches on average per year worldwide. According to the recently published FAA report, the average number of commercial geo launches competed was approximately 18 per year over the time frame. I think most of us, if not all of us, know that the overwhelming majority of these launches were performed by non-U.S. providers. Out of the 182 launches over this time frame, 10 were performed by U.S., with the most recent being Intelsat 14, launched in 2009. There were no U.S. provider launches in 2010, 2011, 2012. Similar stories in place for the non-geosynchronous market. Out of 55 commercial launches, 17 were performed by a U.S. provider, the most recent being in 2010. SpaceX's inroads into the international commercial market and the missions they plan to launch in 13 to 17 timeframe is a very welcome occurrence. But I'm concerned beyond 2017, and here's why. First, the FAA's forecast shows the peak number of launches, especially non-geosynchronous commercial launches, occurring in 2015 and then drops after the commercial systems deployments are completed in 2017. Second, the U.S. government demand is probably pretty certain through 17-18 timeframe, but the future beyond that is not clear to me. Third, it appears that while inroads may be being made by a U.S. launch service provider into the international launch market, there are other trends that may hamper that continuance. For instance, the FAA's report includes a category of unaddressable launches. These appear to be notionally commercial launches for commercial satellites built by commercial satellite vendors, but the launch services for this category mission are not competed. Instead, to quote the FAA report, Chinese and Russian government-owned aerospace companies routinely package satellite launches and financing together. Historically, approximately 5 geosynchronous missions per year fall into this category, with some number of non-geosynchronous, say between two or 6 missions a year, depending on the year, adding to that total. What is concerning is that the FAA forecast seems to expect this trend for unaddressable missions internationally to grow in number. In addition to Chinese and Russian missions, to quote the report, the future will add Indian and Japanese satellite manufacturers to the list that will pursue contracts on a strategic, non-competitive basis. Keep in mind that these missions are in addition to what I would call government missions in support of that particular nation's security services or self-defense forces. To illustrate the point, we could take last year's launch record as an example. So last year, roughly, depending on the database you use, roughly 78 launches, 73, if you eliminate what I'll call demonstration launches. Out of that 73, 16, 17 were actually commercial launches, followed by 15 Chinese government, 12 launches supporting the ISS, 11 U.S. government payload launches, 5 in support of the Russian government, 1 in support of the government of Japan, 1 in support of India, leaving a remainder of 11, 5 being unaddressable geosynchronous and 6 non-geosynchronous. So if my numbers are correct, then last year the total competitive market could have been 28 instead of 17. And the unaddressable market if that's again true, then the unaddressable market represented almost 40% of potential competitive commercial launch service. So that would lead me to the question of what steps could we take to assist in making U.S.-based transportation industry more competitive. In my view, we can only directly affect ourselves. And the world launch market has some very steep competition with labor costs that appear to be much less than what is currently would represent a U.S. aerospace industry worker. Perhaps it's time to explore or re-explore the pursuit of our own package deals. Again, I don't have the answers. I'm asking questions. But perhaps by exploring opportunities for favorable financing or some sort of corporate tax credit or some other incentive for our U.S. satellite manufacturers, that would benefit them and keep them competitive internationally if they were to select a U.S. launch service provider as a potential. A potential additional path we might explore might be in the propulsion area. The ability to have an indigenous rocket propulsion capability, I believe, is essential to having a domestic space transportation industry. The rocket engine certainly can greatly influence the cost of a launch vehicle. I think the planned merger, GenCorp, Aerojet, and PWR that's being pursued is probably a good recognition of reduction in our domestic demand. With the merger, there will not be the opportunity for competition at the liquid rocket engine supplier level, but there will be competition. The competition will be at a higher level. It'll be between the launch service providers, between SpaceX, ULA, and Orbital, to name 3, dealing with liquid rocket engines. SpaceX is building its own engines in-house. Orbital is using a U.S. modified foreign engine for its first stage, and ULA is using a mix of foreign and U.S. liquid propulsion for its Atlas. As pressure to compete increases, the launch service cost control and launch service cost control continues to be a challenge. This could perhaps have an unintended consequence of driving U.S. propulsion overseas. We need to continue to ask ourselves what steps, if any, need to be taken to ensure we continue to have a domestic rocket propulsion capability. Perhaps it's time to explore the formation of an international rocket propulsion partnerships, similar to what was put in place with Schneckman and GE for jet engines, in order to pool resources, ensure our recipe isn't lost, and to potentially get competition back into one of the largest cost elements of a rocket. Lastly, we probably need the U.S. commercial satellite builders and operators that tend to buy foreign launch services to come tell us how and why they do business with foreign launch providers, and what would make U.S. launch providers more competitive. I think I know those answers, but I'd like to hear it from them, and how they want to do business from a U.S.-based range. I don't know what the answers are. I'm not even sure I've asked the right questions. But these are my thoughts on what I believe is a very difficult topic. Just to leave you with some observations. Again, they aren't new. They just point to the difficulty of the situation. There appears to be an oversupply of launch capability worldwide. And most operators don't seem to be operating at their throughput capacity. The numbers of providers aren't decreasing. They're growing. Significant sums are being invested by foreign companies and countries to develop new or enhance older foreign systems. The international competition to provide space transportation services for commercial satellites is not just between companies. It's going to be hard for a U.S. company to successfully compete internationally in such a strategic environment. Those are my thoughts. Thank you for your time.